I can't risk Wanda finding out that I'm in one of these work. Guys? Guys? Hello? I think she's coming back, guys. Oh, shoot.
It's over.
So long, darling.
I'm no longer in Westview, but I feel I loved it. But not everyone who watched WandaVision was as excited by the ending as I was. Many people thought the lack of Mephisto or some other grand character reveal made the finale feel underwhelming. Since the finale, I've been thinking about expectations and the nature of fandom, especially regarding weekly episodic television. And I realized that what WandaVision has to say is even more profound and meta than I talked about in the last video, which you can find right here if you haven't watched yet. And the heart of it comes down to this. Wanda wasn't the only one grieving loss. But I'm getting ahead of myself. WandaVision was a show about grief, and brilliantly, the creators of the show structured the events of the plot to coincide with the 5 stages of grief.
Denial. Notice how Wanda seems to have no memory of how she got here.
Yes, we moved from...
Anger. Bargaining. Depression.
I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine.
And acceptance.
WandaVision writer Jack Schaefer also had this to say in an interview with Deadline. We didn't think this series needed a big bad. I mean, the big bad is grief, you know? And that's the story we were telling. Now, personally, I was on board with all this, with the story the creators intended to tell. I mean, right from the beginning, I was all in. I even called a few things a few weeks early. Here, check it out. But I don't think the story needs a big bad pulling the strings. Perhaps she even watched these old sitcoms as a child in Sokovia and turns to them again. But at the same time, I also fell into the same trap as everyone else and had a few moments of disappointment. I mean, it legit would have been amazing to see Ian McKellen as Magneto.
Am I right?
And this disappointed feeling immediately brought me back to a few other recent examples of finales that were, well,
Disappointing.
How I Met Your Mother and Game of Thrones. And while the mass disappointment to WandaVision was nowhere near as strong or as universal as the backlash to those two shows, it was still shockingly similar. Take a look. How I Met Your Mother kind of shot itself in the foot right from the beginning. The very title of the show built up a crazy expectation that everything we saw over the course of 9 seasons was going to pay off when Ted finally meets the mother. And so when that expectation is not only not met, but subverted, it left the fandom pretty upset.
What?
And similarly, but perhaps more relevant, Game of Thrones told an increasingly more magical and fantastic story that sent the fandom into a spiral of theories. I mean, with a character like Bran or the Three-Eyed Raven, I was totally sucked into theories about how he was going to time travel and be revealed to be Bran the Builder all along. And the finale was going to be this euphoric, mind-bending, time-travel-y fantasy smorgasbord with dragons and magic and all the things. And instead, we got people sitting around under a tent. And now, the legacies of both of those shows are pretty tainted. Which brings me back to this. Wanda wasn't the only one grieving loss. Whenever a show or a film or an epic series of novels allows room for viewer speculation, and then delivers something different than what we expected, or even just different than what we came up with on our own and our own theories, it inevitably leads to disappointment. And this feeling comes from a loss of our imagined reality. And we begin, in a very small way, to grieve. WandaVision did give us plenty of fantastic characters. There's Wanda and Vision, duh. But we also saw Darcy and Agent Woo from previous films, a grown-up Monica Rambeau who becomes Photon, a recast Pietro Maximoff, Wanda's children from the comics, Billy and Tommy, and fanboy favorites, Agatha Harkness and Vision 2.0. I mean, so far so good. They gave us a lot of good characters from the comics. But the trouble comes in who we didn't see. Now, if my TikTok feed was any indication, we should have seen at least one of the following. Mephisto, or Doctor Doom as the big bad. Doctor Strange in some capacity with a tie-in to his forthcoming film. Ultron, I mean, people even showed that his voice was in the cast list on Google. Captain Marvel with her connection to Monica. Magneto, since Magneto is Wanda's father in the comics. There was talk of a secret 10th episode, since there was a week between WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. People hoped to see more of the Skrulls, which we didn't see any of. Well, I mean, we kinda did. But perhaps the biggest disappointment, a character we wanted to see and then didn't, was Evan Peters being revealed to be a cross of the X-Men and the Marvel universes. The writers of WandaVision did intentionally try to throw people off the trail of where things were going. I mean, they know their audience. They know we make up these crazy theories. They teased the whole, "Who's doing this to you, Wanda?" And then they cast the Fox Universe Quicksilver as a recast Marvel Universe Quicksilver. And I can't blame people for being disappointed in that one. I mean, Evan Peters ended up being a guy named Boner. But this is where WandaVision gets super meta. Wanda had an expectation that she and Vision would both survive the Thanos threat and be together, maybe even raise a family. And when Thanos crushed that expectation, she obviously felt devastating loss and grief. And instead of accepting what life gave her, I mean, after an appropriate amount of time, her subconscious created her own fantasy world where she could control every little aspect of her life, and unfortunately the lives of everyone else in the town.
Myself included.
In a similar way, we use TV to escape from our reality, especially when life doesn't go the way we thought it should. And because we can't control life, we long to be able to control our fantasy worlds. But in WandaVision, both Wanda and the viewer realize that we can't control everything. The show ended in a way contrary to our expectations, and some of us felt like we lost something that could have been so much more. Now, obviously, losing family members and having your TV theories proved wrong are not even in the same league in terms of the level of grief they cause. I mean, one is devastating and life-altering, life-shattering, and the other is annoying. But the lesson we can glean from the story of Wanda's grief is still something that we can learn from. In this way, WandaVision reveals to the fandom the dangers of getting lost in the grief of loss, even if it's a minor loss. We didn't get what we expected. We got something else, something that Wanda got, reality. And like Wanda, we're now in a cycle. We can either let any anger we feel towards WandaVision progress through the stages of grief and lead to acceptance, or we can let WandaVision just be one more life disappointment that we run from and turn all of our hopes for an escape onto another show that we can use as a distraction. So, you now have a choice. You can either stay a prisoner to this vicious cycle of escapism, speculation, expectation, disappointment, anger, and then more escapism, or, like Wanda, you can learn to accept reality for what it is and go live in a hut in the woods. Wait, okay, sorry. This metaphor gets lost somewhere, but you get what I'm saying. But now, don't misunderstand me. Accepting the reality of a show that doesn't explore any of your theories or meet your expectations doesn't mean that you then have to look at it uncritically and force yourself to like it. That's not what I'm saying. It means that you examine and process the show, the good or the bad, for what is present in the show, for where the story actually goes, for what's actually there, instead of critiquing it for who or what wasn't there compared to your expectations. Just like there's comfort and an underlying horror of escaping into TV, there's also a horror and an underlying comfort to reality. Once we can accept what is without judgment or expectation, we can finally find a sense of enduring peace in our lives and grow into who we were always meant to be. I finally realized that all the disappointment I felt about WandaVision was entirely self-inflicted. I was the cause, me and my blasted expectations. And when I sit back and attempt to look at it objectively, I see that WandaVision was something really special. There has never been and probably will never be a show exactly like it. Something that can blend the best of the entire history of the American sitcom with the modern storytelling spectacle of the billion-dollar franchise. Something that can tell an intensely entertaining and engrossing story on the surface and simultaneously display a depth of meaning underneath, not to mention a wealth of meta-analysis. So yeah, it's over. I'm no longer in Westview, but I feel satisfied.